For almost all of us, spirituality is like exercise. It's hard to put matters of faith first, but most of us do it because we think faith will make our lives better. We expect to get something out of it. And we do, at least much of the time. Paul even says, physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. This is why we work so hard and continue to struggle, for our hope is in the living God. But here's the rub. Being faithful does not mean that everything is always going to work out well in your life. And isn't it ironic? We always see the things that God is not doing in our lives, at least according to our perspective, but we seldom see the things He is doing. And the truth of the matter is, life sometimes does get harder and tougher when we do put faith first. So it's completely natural when people start to question whether God is there, whether He really cares, and whether prayer works. That's exactly what happens when people try Jesus and then bail when things don't work out exactly the way they expect. And a big part of that problem is that we seem to have the impression that the main purpose of faith is to make our lives better. But God is more interested in making us holy than happy. And already I can hear some of you saying, well, if faith is not going to make my life better, then what's the point? Exactly. That's exactly the question Ecclesiastes is trying to answer. And at least on the surface, part of that answer is distressing and disturbing, because it's not the answer most of us would choose. So maybe some background would help. In chapter 1, verse 1, we read, "These are the words of the teacher, King David's son, who ruled in Jerusalem." In Hebrew, the word teacher is koheleth, which means one who gathers, and that's what a teacher does. He or she gathers information and insight, then imparts them. And in verse 12 and following it says, "I, the teacher, was king of Israel. I devoted myself to search for understanding and to explore by wisdom everything being done under heaven. Look, I'm wiser than any of the kings who ruled before me." So the book identifies the author as Solomon, the son of David, who was renowned for the wisdom God gave him. And Ecclesiastes is one of 3 books in the Old Testament known as the wisdom literature: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. All 3 are a very public grappling with one big puzzle. What does it mean to live well? In Proverbs, we have a collection of short, pithy sayings that give practical and spiritual advice for success in life. And the tone is completely optimistic. In short, Proverbs says, "Love and revere God, and all will go well for you." Here's a good example from Proverbs 3. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart," it says. "Seek His will in all you do, and He'll show you which path to take. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom, but revere the Lord and turn from evil. Then you'll have healing for your body and strength for your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and the best part of everything you produce. Then He'll fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine." The trouble is, this is the book of Proverbs, not the book of promises. And yet we tend to see these passages as a list of guarantees. But by their very nature, Proverbs tend to be a reflection of how things tend to go, and they're not a sure bet for any of us, and the Jews understood that. We should, too, because our own experience proves it to be true. Good things do not always happen to good people. Both Job and Ecclesiastes take that different approach, pointing out that life doesn't always seem to make sense, and that obedience is no guarantee of success and prosperity. The tone here is much darker and stands in heavy contrast to the feel-good messages we often hear at church. If we look at the big picture, Ecclesiastes has 3 main themes, and the first is the march of time.
Generations come and generations go, but the earth It's been here long before us, and will be long after. No one remembers people from long ago, and all the people yet to come, they too will be forgotten by those who come after them.
So, in a cosmic sense, all of us are just temporary, like stars or flowers that emerge, flourish, then die. The second big theme is we are all going to die.
Humans face the same fate as the animals: death. All people, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, those who offer sacrifices to God and those who do not, they all share the same destiny. All this activity and madness, then we all join the dead.
And the third major focus in Ecclesiastes is life's random nature. The author calls it chance. In other words, you can't control anything. So, if you want to master life, you're setting yourself up for constant disappointment. And if you're one of those Christians who believes everything happens for a reason, Solomon would disagree. In fact, the book ties all three of its major themes together by saying life is hevel. It's a Hebrew word that means smoke or vapor. Like smoke, life is mysterious and constantly changing shape from one minute to the next. So if you try to grab it, it goes right through your fingers. And if you're stuck in the middle of it, as in a fog, you can't see clearly either. The problem is modern translations have lost the metaphor. They usually translate hevel as meaningless. But when you read the book closely, the writer is not saying life has no meaning, just that it's not clear or something we can control. In fact, hevel has two main meanings in Ecclesiastes, and both are related to the very nature of smoke or vapor. The first is that smoke, or hevel, is fleeting and disappears quickly, and it's the same with life. So in chapter 11, Solomon says, "When people live to be old, let them rejoice in every day of life, but let them also remember that everything still to come is hevel, or fleeting." And the writer adds, "It's a wonderful thing to be young. Enjoy every minute of it, but remember you must give an account to God for everything you do. So refuse to worry. Keep your body healthy, and remember that youth, with a whole life before you, is hevel, or fleeting." The second major meaning of hevel is related to how you can't grab or grasp smoke. And so it is with life. The minute you think you've got it figured out, you find you don't. So hevel is not just fleeting, it's a paradox or puzzle. And as an example, Solomon points to the lack of justice in the world. In chapter 8, he writes, "I've thought deeply about all that goes on here under the sun, where people hurt each other. I've seen wicked people buried with honor, and good people are often treated as though they were wicked, and wicked people are often treated as though they were good. This is so meaningless," or "it's such a puzzle." That's hevel, a paradox or something that just doesn't make sense. By the way, that phrase, "under the sun," meaning here on earth, is used 30 times in the book. Life is hevel, or fleeting and puzzling, under the sun. So although Solomon does affirm it's a good thing to revere God and live a righteous life, he also makes it clear that's no guarantee all will go well, no matter what proverb seems to focus on. It's just a different emphasis with God at the middle of both. At its core, Ecclesiastes says, just stop trying to control everything. Hold everything with an open hand, because anything can be lost, and you really have no say over anything except your attitude and approach to life. In other words, the author doesn't want us to lose hope. He just wants us to be more humble about life and see there are so many things we can't predict or control, no matter how smart and talented we are. And amid all that, the book tells us to stop worrying and learn to enjoy the little things in life, like the sun on your face, a good meal with friends, and the satisfaction that comes from your work, because they're all gifts from God. When most of us talk about Ecclesiastes, it's all about God's sovereignty and our need for accountability. And that's valid because the book does talk about those things. But there's a second underlying current that often gets ignored because it's so simple, so human, and it sounds downright secular. At least 7 times in the book, Solomon tells us to relax and have a good time with the people we love. In chapter 2, we read, "What do people get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Even at night, their minds cannot rest. So I decided there's nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and find satisfaction in work. Then I realized these pleasures are from the hand of God." Chapter 3, "I've seen the burden God has placed on all of us. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but we still can't see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. So I concluded there's nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. People should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are gifts from God." And chapter 5, "We can't take our riches with us, but it's good for people to eat, drink, and enjoy their work under the sun during the short life God has given them, and to accept their lot in life, for this is indeed a gift from God." I know, some of you are saying, "Yeah, but the coming of Jesus changes everything." And of course, it does. But long before the arrival of Christ, Ecclesiastes was a standalone message, which was, you can't figure out the smoke of life, so enjoy what you can and keep God firmly in mind. That's good advice for us, too. So the pattern is clear. Yes, life is fleeting and puzzling and sometimes downright evil, but there's still lots to enjoy if we're willing to go looking for those things. Even life's disappointments are a way of finding God's goodness and better ways of living. So stop complaining when there are so many opportunities for joy and satisfaction. That will be easier if we finally get it through our thick heads that we can't fix life, even though we have a sense that so much is wrong. As Solomon starts his book, he says, "I saw everything going on under the sun, and really it's all so meaningless, like chasing the wind. What is wrong cannot be made right. What is missing cannot be recovered." It's like everything we see around us. Everything, and I do mean everything, is made of molecules, which are made up of atoms, which are mostly empty space. So this book is more not here than here. It looks solid, but mostly it's not. And that's the way this life is, too. Which is why Solomon ends his book the way he starts it. In chapter 12, verse 8, he says, "Everything is meaningless, completely meaningless." Again, he means fleeting and temporary. The words of the wise are like cattle prods, painful but helpful. Their collected sayings are like a nail-studded stick with which a shepherd drives the sheep. So here is my final conclusion. Revere God and obey His commands, for this is everyone's duty. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. So Ecclesiastes is going to poke you and make you uncomfortable to move you forward into that accountability to God. And notice, Solomon says one day God is going to clear the hevel, wipe away the smoke and the vapor. Until then, our response is quite straightforward. We're to revere the Lord and keep His commandments. In the coming weeks, we'll look at what Solomon has to say about specific areas of life: wisdom and education, pleasure, money and achievement, work and prestige, political power, social injustice, and the inevitability of death. All of it is as fresh and relevant today as the day he first wrote the words. And of course, we approach all this with the benefit of hindsight. God's promise, which we don't see until Jesus, is that He will enter into the hevel of life and bring ultimate purpose to our existence. But meantime, we need some humility. Humility to see that even if we can't control life, it's still worth living. That means every decision we make and every action we take really does matter, especially when we consider the sweep of eternity. So remember, life is smoke and meaning, not smoke and mirrors. So this week, give up control and let God be God. Go with the flow and enjoy the simple pleasures, knowing you don't have to figure out what life is all about because God already has. Just trust Him. Live in the moment and stay emotionally and spiritually level amid the hevel.